Hey guys, thanks for stopping by for another episode of Triple Play. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and don't forget to sponsor those or help those that sponsor us. That's Brookes Bible College. We love Brookes Bible College. If you're interested in a Bible college, a young person wanting to go to college, wanting to get into the ministry, consider them. Their big thing is they want to get you a great education, but they also want you to do it without a load of debt. If you're trying to be a missionary, we're going to talk about that. One of the things about missionaries is you can't do missions if you got a big load of debt. And if you're going to a normal Bible college or seminary, you're talking usually $50,000 to $100,000 worth of debt. So a good reason to check out Brookes Bible College is strictly that. But really, another good reason is you're going to get a great biblical degree. They're incredible. You'll get every ounce of what you pay for, and guarantee you'll fall in love with the faculty there. Great people. And so don't forget to check out Brookes Bible College. And if you're a layperson, you want to go a little deeper, want to take a few classes, check them out. They do a lot of conferences. We just had them in and we were talking about their most recent conference on biblical counseling and discipleship. But they do all sorts of conferences throughout the year. So again, check them out. Brookes Bible College. That said, I'm excited about today's guest. Yes, he has the same name. No, it's not spelled the same. And but I got to know you a while back through a common friend who's a friend to our podcast. Vic Miller introduced me to you.
Yep.
He said you ought to get to know this guy for any other reason. He has almost the same name as you.
Yeah.
So Josh Reed, but you spell it R-E-A-D like you read a book, and I spell it R-E-E-D like you're playing an instrument.
Yeah, and my middle name is Cant. It's a family name, so
Very different.
yeah, very different.
Not Eric. There you go. But that said, Vic introduced us. It was a great introduction. We had a great conversation, having some coffee and getting to know one another a while back. And you have lived a very fascinating life, Josh. Do you think about that?
No, not really.
No?
I just try to put one foot in front of the other. Eh?
Try to keep all the balls in the air as a husband and dad. So
Yeah.
that's probably true. But no, I was listening to your story and I was absolutely drawn in because you've had this interesting life. So I want to rewind. I want people to get to know you a little bit. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you met your wife and how you maybe came to faith. And then maybe into your call to missions a little bit.
Yeah, so, we're here in St. Louis. I grew up, or was born 2 hours north of here in Quincy, Illinois. Was born 2 months after my dad became a pastor at a church there. When I was 10, we ended up moving to Milwaukee, where the Lord moved my dad to a different church up there in Milwaukee, and then right at 16 we moved out to Tacoma, Washington. Ended up going to college in St. Paul, Minnesota at Northwestern College, and met my wife at the neighbor college, Bethel College, there in St. Paul. Got married, moved back to Tacoma, and by that time all of my family had kind of dispersed and gone everywhere else. So
all right. And then you obviously go to college. Were you going to college to do missions? I mean, you have a technology background, right?
Right. So I went to college actually ended up going into graphic design. So went to graphic design for college. Northwestern, you had to double major in Bible and in whatever it was that you were degreeing in. So I got my degree in Bible studies, biblical studies, and graphic design.
Okay. And then so you graduated. How about the call to missions? Were you always felt like called to missions or to call to go do something different, or was that something that kind of came around?
Yeah, no, not even remotely. Everyone had always asked me, with my dad being a pastor, everyone had always been asking me like, oh, are you going to go into the ministry like your dad? Are you going to? That was never something that I was feeling called to do, never something that I wanted to do. So I was a graphic designer in 1997. I was working in a design firm in Minneapolis, and on the way home from work one evening, my car basically just turned off on the side of the freeway. Freezing cold outside. Minneapolis, if you guys have been in Minnesota in the wintertime, with the wind chill, it gets way below freezing. And my car, the alternator essentially had shredded itself and shredded the belt. So I was on the side of the road, and a guy stopped, was giving me a jump start. The car would start up. As soon as we take the leads off the battery, the car would die. And as I was looking into the engine bay, I recognized that the alternator belt was shredded. So I was like, oh, there's my problem. My car was still running because it was connected to the leads, but the belt wasn't moving at all. So when I went to move it, it shredded my fingers off right there on the side of the freeway. So it took a little bit off, as you could.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, but I mean, you're missing a part of your finger now.
Yeah. Two of my fingers are missing because they got ripped off in an alternator belt. What's amazing about that was I was laying in the hospital 2,500 miles away from all of my family. My hand is in a cast. I don't know if they removed my fingers or not. I wake up from surgery the next day and I don't know what's underneath the cast. And I was laying in the bed, and that was the first time that I really felt like the Lord spoke directly to my heart. So I was laying there, and I had been considering a bunch of different options, and felt like the Lord said, this is the path that I want you to step on, and continue in graphic design, continue with staying at Northwestern. And with that, I did, and he continued to bless my graphic design career. But also, that's right when the company that I worked for wanted to start a website up, and they asked me to develop the website. So I developed my first website in 1997. They wanted me to study all of the programs, because before that, we had been doing all the graphic design with an X-Acto knife, like the really old school way of graphic design.
Right. And now you're starting to use the more modern technology, Adobe, things like that.
So they had bought all those programs, they had bought all the computers, but they didn't know how to use any of them. And so they basically just were like, hey, you don't have anything to do. Your hand is in a cast. Study all this and teach everybody how to do it. And so that just exploded my career. Suddenly I was the assistant manager at this design firm. I was running circles around all these other designers who were 10 years in the career already. And I was just eat, sleep, breathe graphic design, and it was amazing. So there was just so much fruit from just resting in the fact that the Lord had led me down this path. And does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's great.
Don't go too far in.
No, this is your story. I'm just listening in, and people are getting to hear a little bit about how God orchestrated this. So you're obviously being very successful at that. You're married, and then eventually, where's the shift that you're going to go start to do missions, and then how did you figure that out? So.
Yeah. Okay. So graduated college, got married to the woman that I had dated all through college. Loved her so much. We're still married to this day. And so with that, we moved back to Tacoma, ended up getting a graphic design job I was the lead print designer for Costco Wholesale out there in the Seattle area. Then moved into being an art director for a design firm in Seattle area. And then in 2006, I started my own company. That was just a massive faith step. Though I felt like I had been pulled towards that by the Lord for 3 years, and I just never had the faith to be able to step out and trust that he was going to provide for my family, my growing family. At that point, we had 2 children of our 4. a friend of mine actually came to me after 3 years of the Lord really pressing on me, like, start your own company, start your own company. And he just asked me, like, do you actually believe that the Lord is going to provide for you? Like, it's not just that God is your provider, not your employer. Your employer is the conduit for the provision from God. And so that was really this, like, that's what I was able to break through then and go, yes, God is my provider. Nothing else on this world, just God is my provider. He uses all sorts of conduits. So we started the company in 2007. I ended up, the web was so new at that point still. It was really, really new. And, the iPhone came out in 2007, and that's when mobile websites, responsive websites, all that were still exploding. Well, everyone had been thinking through this problem in the web world for several years. They knew that the mobile versions were coming, and they were trying to figure it out. So I was right in that mix of, like, the people thinking about it. I ended up solving something that put me on an international scale. Like, Josh knows what he's talking about with its web development. And then my company just kind of exploded because of the Lord's favor on it. I suddenly had multiple employees. I suddenly was speaking at events. I was getting bigger and bigger contracts. And by the end of 2009, as a business leader, business owner, there's so much intimidation, where you're constantly going, is the Lord going to provide this month for my family? And so I always had a plan B in my back pocket. Like, if this doesn't work out, I'm just going to go work for one of my customers who love me, and that'll be how I take care of the family. And I felt really convicted by that one day, that the Lord was saying, like, I asked you to start the company, not have plan B, plan C. And so I really dove headfirst into the business and learned as much as I possibly could. And during that season, the Lord kept saying, like, there would be a huge blessing of a contract. And then it felt like the Lord was challenging my wife and I, like, would you give everything up for the gospel? And we thought that was the ask of, would we give all the money that we were making up for the gospel? Well, at the end of this season, it was really clear that the Lord was saying, would you go? Would you go international? And that was a feeling that we had had for several years. I guess real quick, I'll stop and say, like, I feel like the Lord always kind of gives you those nudges. A friend of mine used to call it, the Holy Spirit is a gentleman. He's not going to force you into anything. He's always, like, calling you to something. If you,
yeah, I get it.
For several years, we had felt like international was something in our family's future, but we didn't know what that looked like. It feels like looking through fog. And so you're just trying to stay on the path, and the fog is so thick you can't really see super far, but you can kind of tell, oh, I'm going in that direction. It feels like there's mountains over there or whatever, so that was really, the Lord was kind of leading us through this and leading us international. We didn't know what that looked like until the end of 2009. It was like, we sold our house, we gave all of our stuff away, and my wife and I went to YWAM in Hawaii to actually consolidate all of their websites onto one server and try to fix some of that stuff.
So I know what YWAM is, but what is YWAM? So
Youth with a Mission. It's a missional organization. So our church had been kind of tied together with that.
I love YWAM. I just wanted to make sure. I always like to let the guests know, because when I hear YWAM, if they're not in the church or their organization, their church isn't plugged in with them, they may not know. who they are. So, and I didn't realize they had a place in Hawaii. I know they have a place in Colorado. So,
They're all over the world,
well, that is true. But I mean, like headquartered kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're doing something like that, it sounds like they got at least a decent sized quarters in Hawaii.
Yeah, they've got a big headquarters there that the Lord has done miraculous things to provide for them. So it's, great. We went there, and then that ended up not being the right step. And so through that, we ended up going to Sweden for a few.
Okay, so I got to rewind here. How was living in Hawaii, though?
Oh, it was incredible.
I bet. That's so fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your kids probably loved it.
Well, they were so little. We were only there for a few months, and then then we moved them to Sweden. So it's like the exact opposite. We moved them to Sweden in the middle of winter. So at that point, our 4 children were very small. We moved to Hawaii when my youngest was 2 months old.
Oh, okay.
So that's this 2010, moved to Sweden to very early 2011. Through that, ended up going down to Barcelona for a little bit, and then some friends who we had made during our time in Hawaii, they moved down to South Africa, and we were kind of tired of moving around 4 little children, in like 3 suitcases around the world, trying to find furnished apartments, in foreign countries. So some friends invited us down to Cape Town, so we got our volunteer visa and we went down to Cape Town.
All right, so a couple questions. Sweden, what was Sweden like?
I loved Sweden. It was on time everywhere you went. So, it works like clockwork. I could live in Sweden for the rest of my life. It's beautiful. The people are friendly. They have what I call the happiest place on earth, which is IKEA. So you can go there and get coffee and cinnamon buns or kanelbullar for very cheap, and just sit there all day and have a great time. So
very cool. And then you said Barcelona.
Yeah.
Spain. What did you think of Barcelona?
Barcelona was so interesting. I really enjoyed being there. It was a quick turnaround. Some memories from being there are just my kids really loved being able to not be freezing. So they loved being able to walk around on the sidewalk, and just the Spain. In Sweden, everybody speaks English to you as soon as they hear your American accent, right? No, even if you're trying to speak Swedish, they'll just speak English back. In Spain, they don't. So my kids loved that. It was now it felt like a foreign country. Okay.
So then you go down to South Africa.
Yeah.
Cape Town, South Africa. All right. So how does obviously this is where you're going to stay for a while, right? So did you buy a place, rent a place? Were you thinking missions? What when you went down there, what was the thought process, and then what kind of emerged out of it?
Yeah. So we went down there, just self-funded. I was still running my company on a really small scale in the U.S. So that's how we were funded. We weren't really missionaries. I call myself the worst missionary in the world because I wasn't out to do traditional missions work. We arrived there, and the thought process was there was a group of 15 adults. My wife and I were 2 of the 15. We were going to go into one individual township there and just do missions. What does that look like, right? There wasn't really any leadership or and it all fell apart pretty quickly.
Gotcha, because there wasn't a good plan or a good execution of it. Nobody really, it was just kind of this like, hey, a bunch of us guys come down here, we can kind of do this thing, and we all kind of know what we're doing, but we really don't. And okay, I've been a part of all sorts of different projects over the years, so I get it.
Yeah, so it all kind of fell apart. So then it was just kind of my wife and I standing in a foreign country with nobody around. And so we ended up, I looked at the map of the township and I had just kind of circled an area that had, let's say, 100 shacks. And I just was like, this is my area. It was a little horseshoe pathway that had a whole bunch of shacks there. So when I say shacks, I'm talking like, if you can imagine the poorest of the poor, illegal foreigners coming from other parts of Africa, because Cape Town and Johannesburg are the rich cities of the continent of Africa. So if you live in Zimbabwe, you come down to Cape Town, you just walk there basically, and then you try to get a gardener job or try to get like working at somebody's house washing their clothes or doing their wash. And then they'll work for cash versus getting a paycheck. So then they're just working for cash, and they live and they'll rent like a 10-foot by 10-foot square of someone's backyard, and then whatever stuff they can find to build a wall or build a roof on this shack, that's where they live.
So it could be tin, could be cardboard, could be whatever. They'll tie it together, glue it together, tape it together.
Yep, pretty much. And Cape Town is called the Cape of Storms. Terrible, terrible wind storms happen there, and it
goes away, and then they got to go find it. Yeah. Or grab somebody else's stuff that's gone somewhere.
You know, for the years that I lived there, the verse in James that talks about how, like, pray for those who are in prison as if you're in prison yourself. Like, every time the wind blew or every time the storms would be blowing and I would be in my house that I rented, it was just this constant reminder to be praying for the people who I had been sitting in their shacks with every day. They were in an emotional and mental prison, just sitting there going like, I have a family, and I'm sitting here every time it rains, like my bed gets wet every time, just everything is wet and everything is, it's bad. It's really bad. And so I sat in those shacks for 2 years, and I called it my hugging and crying ministry, because I'd carry tea bags in a Ziploc bag, and I would go into these shacks and I would just say, hey, I'm not here to give you money. I don't have any money. I'd love to share my story and hear your story. And their stories were pretty similar. A lot of pain emotionally that you and I have never even thought of, let alone experienced. And it would always end pretty much the same way, with me just holding and crying with people in their shacks in the pain that they were experiencing. And my heart just completely broke after 2 years of doing that, to the point where a friend from Sweden flew us up to Sweden for a few months just to recover.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So you're hearing these stories. Now, you said you were going there with tea. Is that to have tea with them, or did you give them the tea bags as something to leave them with?
Just to sit and have tea with them.
Okay, that's what I assumed, is like, hey, I brought some tea. If you warmed us up, we'll have some tea together, and we can chat. If I'm trying to think here, because that I can't imagine, you're dealing with all sorts of people from different cultures too, I'd imagine, because they're coming from different countries.
Yep.
And so, did you find any of them, because you were from the U.S. that looked at you like, you can't connect with me?
Yeah. My buddy who's also, he used to laugh about the fact that everybody that I would speak with that would have diamonds in their eyes. It's like, they speak in a lot of metaphors. A lot of the African languages tend to be metaphorical. And so, yeah, like they would look at me and have diamonds in their eyes, like, oh, American, he has US dollars in his pocket and just give everybody money, like I'm Santa Claus. But really, when I first started with my 100 shacks, there was several men who would sit out during the daytime, and I went to try to sit with them. They would speak in their language, because these guys were from Zimbabwe area. They were speaking in Shona, and they wouldn't speak English around me, and I just would sit in the mud and just wait for them and they would just be sitting there having a conversation. You could tell they would be making fun of me, telling jokes, whatever.
Did you learn any of the language, Enter, while you're there?
I didn't learn Shona. I learned Xhosa and Afrikaans, enough to hear it. I'm probably like...
Can you speak it at all?
isiXhosa is the clicking language, obviously. So I can say like, which... those are some good clicking noises, but it really just means, hey, I'm really sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just curious if you, if you picked up some things. So were you able to like have some conversations with some of the people, be like, I care for you, or hey, or did you have to like try to explain it in English? Like
No, I would have English conversations, but really I sat in the mud for a few months with those men, and, we had hired somebody from that area, from the shacks. We had hired her to just help out around the house. My wife taught her how to read English. She had never gone to school before, So she had just had a baby, and while she was at work at our house, her baby had to go to a 6-month checkup at the clinic. And so her neighbor had taken the baby to the clinic. Well, then her neighbor all of a sudden got a phone call to get a job outside of the township. And so she was like, hey, you need to come home right now and get your baby. Well, she doesn't have a car. It's not like she can just rush back to the clinic. So my wife calls me and she's like, hey, you need to go to the clinic in the township and get the baby and take it to the doctor's appointment. Well, I've had 4 kids, I've gone to the doctor's appointment with babies. So I walk into the clinic, white American man walking into a clinic in a township, and there's 75 mamas all standing there, and I've never seen Lydia's baby. I've never seen David. I don't know what David looks like, let alone there's 75 strangers with babies in this township. And so I'm standing in the clinic and I'm like, David Chirwa, and no one's saying anything except they're all laughing and making fun of me standing there, and they're like, oh, and so finally the lady stands up after 3 minutes of me just standing there calling out David Chirwa. She's like, oh, are you looking for David Chirwa? Yes, I'm looking for David Chirwa. And so she's like, okay, great. Here's the baby. And then she just jets. And so now I have this baby. Again, I've never seen David. I don't know if I even have the right child. And so then I'm just sitting there and I sit down in the middle of all these mamas taking their kids to the clinic. And I'm just waiting for them to call David Chirwa. And so all the women are just laughing, making fun of me. They can't believe that a white guy's sitting there holding a baby, because again, men don't even really hold the babies in this culture. And so I'm sitting there holding it, and the baby starts crying. Now I don't, babies cry because they're either hungry or they're tired or they need a diaper change. And so I don't know what's going on. I don't know when the last time the kid's eaten or slept or diaper. And so I stand up, and again, I've had multiple babies, so I just start consoling it, and the baby stops crying. And as soon as David stopped crying, the whole place went silent, like dead silent. They had been making so much fun of me, and then just silence. And so then I take the baby into the checkup. All's well. Take the baby home, walk out of the township with the baby, walk back to my house. Good thing I had the right baby, you know. So,
And that's good. That's good. She was probably happy to see her child. So
yeah. Angelina Jolie out of the township. So, when I came back to the township the next day, there was a milk crate with the men. I didn't have to sit in the mud anymore.
How cool is that?
Because all of those women had talked about the white guy carrying the Cheerwas baby, and everybody knew all of a sudden. And they had been going to the Cheerwas going, why is this white man taking care of your baby? And James, my buddy, was telling them it's because he loves Jesus. And so the next day there was a milk crate, and I didn't have to sit in the mud, and all of a sudden all the men were speaking in English, and they were asking me, I'm dealing with this situation. What do you think I should do? And I would respond, well, the Bible says, and then I would quote a proverb, or I would quote something from what Jesus had said or Paul had said in the New Testament. And it was like, wow, all of a sudden I was protected in the township. I didn't have to worry about getting murdered or
Mugged or anything. Yeah.
Yeah. I was protected. Everybody knew me. Everybody knew that I was a man of peace. It was amazing. So yeah, that was one of the stories that came out of just the beginning of, I kind of fell into having a reputation there.
That's so it's kind. I mean, as you're talking to me, it sounds to me like you're an accidental missionary.
Everything I've done has been accidental.
Like just completely by accident, you wind up becoming a missionary in South Africa. And now you can click.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
And then I accidentally fell into working for the city of Cape Town.
Yeah, so we got to get to that. So, but before we get there, just working with the people. What were, give me a high. Obviously, was that a high? That sounds kind of like it was a high of the missions. Of working with it and being accepted by the people. Did you find that they, after that, were much more responsive? I mean, obviously you're saying that the men started asking you questions, but just in general, did the population seem much more responsive to the gospel at that point?
They were just much more responsive to having me around.
Okay.
Yeah. South Africa would call itself a Christian nation, but their Christianity is... for the most part, a mixture. And I guess an example, and I wouldn't say this is across the board, maybe it is, but just from my personal experience, the example that I would give is that people will go to church on a Sunday morning, and in the townships, they'll give money to the preacher, but then if God doesn't answer their prayer for, let's say, a job by Thursday, then they'll go to the witch doctor, and then they'll pay the witch doctor a whole bunch of money to get a job. And so it's one of those things where, like, God works for me mentality. They wouldn't necessarily say that out loud.
It's a humanistic, self-centered religious experience.
So...
Okay. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not too much different here. We just don't even go to witch doctors anymore, right? I mean, go down to schools, you see the slogans, just do it. You can do it on your own, self-made, self-willed. Yep. We can go through all the cliches that are out there, but at the end of the day, they're all saying the same thing. Man is his own God. He's made his own image, right? So, So it does sound like Cape Town's much different, maybe just a little more superstitious in how it does it. So
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I stepped away from Africa with was the veil is incredibly thin between the physical realm and the spiritual realm in a culture that celebrates witch doctors and curses, and the veil is very, very thin.
So, were there any interesting experiences where, as far as you said you were protected at that point, but did you run into any, and I know we were going to get to when you left, but prior to that, were there any instances where you felt like you weren't safe? So,
Plenty. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. South Africa is not known for being the safest place. That's why I'm asking. I mean, it's kind of like Brazil, infamous with, robbery, thievery, deaths.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there were plenty of times where I was nearly mugged with my kids, without my kids. Yeah. I rode a motorcycle simply because that's safer. You can pop a curb if someone comes at you with a brick at a stoplight, type of a thing, So, yeah, it's not for the... I became a man being in South Africa, I would say.
Gotcha. All right. And then, were there any, you said that you kind of got low after a couple of years of just all the heartache and crying, and yet you went to Sweden. Did you go back after that?
We did. We came back. At that point, it was very dangerous in the townships.
Were things changing just culturally, or was it was it economically, or was it politically, or was it all the above?
All the above.
Okay.
The whole time that we were in South Africa, they actually called that the lost decade because of the political environment that was taking place during that season. Economically, it really deteriorated. When we first arrived, the South African rand was $6 to $1. And it just dropped and dropped and dropped the whole time we were there, to where now it's at somewhere around 19 to $1. So their currency is really
trashed. It's been trashed. Yeah, it has very little value.
So, it was just getting more and more dangerous as time went on while we were there. And during that season, we returned back from Sweden, and that's right when a buddy of mine who we had made over the 2 years up to that point, he had gotten a contract with the city of Cape Town to audit their system to find corruption. So the mayor of Cape Town had actually hired him without anybody else knowing, type of a thing. So
you have a friend who gets hired by the mayor. The mayor wants this because the mayor is looking for the corruption within the government.
Yep.
That's going on, knowing that there is obviously corruption in government. And so your buddy reaches out to you, and you jump in on this.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it's technology kind of related.
Yeah. He knew I had a background in programming, and so he was like, "Hey, can you figure out this programming language?" I was able to, and so then we started building some custom modules for their SAP system at Cape Town, plugged in the software that we had, and the first day that we plugged it in, we found $30 million that was being stolen.
So when you and I'm gonna pause you, because when you explained it to me, you're like, when we were looking, we had to make sure we weren't going to mess with things. We didn't want people to know we were looking at what's going on.
Yeah.
So we kind of became this filter of the traffic, so that way we didn't stop the flow of it, but we had a way to monitor it.
Yeah.
Correct.
All
right. So I just and so you immediately find $30 million.
Yeah. First day. And so then,
what did the mayor say about that?
I wasn't in those conversations, but those people definitely did not have jobs when we were able to trace back where those accounts were going to. So yeah. After that, my neighbor, we moved into a different neighborhood, and the neighbor that was at that neighborhood had a son similar age to my son, and they became friends, and so then we became friends with the neighbor, because there in South Africa, it's completely different than the U.S. in the fact that everyone is so living at a state of just, I need you as much as you need me for safety, for in case I can't buy groceries, all that. And whether you're black, white, colored, it doesn't matter. That's how the nation functions. And so there's a lot of interdependency, versus here in the U.S., it seems like there's a lot of independence. And that's one of the things that we've struggled with since we've come back. But anyways, my neighbor moved in. We moved in, became friends. He ended up he was working for a company that had a contract with the South African national government. And so I ended up moving to that contract, where I was working in 2 of the 3 quote unquote White Houses of South Africa. And we were rooting out the corruption nationally then. And that's the job that I had when COVID hit.
So same type of thing. You're filtering, looking for this corruption.
Yep.
And did you find a lot?
We did, sadly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would. I mean, if you're looking for it, I'm sure you're going to find it, right? So, and everybody knows South Africa is a place where you can launder money. It's been that way for. I mean, I'm not. It's not a cliche. It is what it is. I mean, that's like acting like Ukraine's not a place to launder money.
Right.
Right. I mean, the whole world knows. So you can ignore it, I guess, as much as you want, but it's the truth. So South Africa, you're working for the government of South Africa, for the top officials, and you're looking for this corruption. What were you seeing were they seeing results?
So, I mean, how do you see results when?
Well, I mean, you start rooting out the corruption, right? So you find it and you stop it and you get rid of those folks. Was that happening, or was it too?
Things move a lot slower than that, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So,
so like U.S. politics.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we all know almost every U.S. senator uses inside trading to make lots of money.
Quiver quantitative, right?
Yeah. So, all right. So you're catching on to this, and then COVID hits.
Yeah.
What happens? How's South Africa respond to COVID? Because I don't know if it's the same as the United States.
It was the strictest lockdown globally, because South Africa is part of the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And so they kind of do whatever the money that's going to come in tells them to do. And so they went on the strictest lockdown globally. And so we were actually locked in our houses for 2 weeks at a time. So no one was allowed to step out onto the street out of their property line. If they did, they had the military patrolling, and that if they found you outside of your property line, they would put you in a containment camp.
Even if you had like 10 by 10, so those little people in their little shacks had to stay straight there?
They somehow just... people don't deal with that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, they have their own set of rules.
Okay.
The townships do. So, yeah, we were stuck kind of in our house for 2 weeks, and then every other Thursday they would open it up so you could go to the grocery store. You had a letter saying, I have 6 people in my household from the government, and then you could buy 6 people's worth of groceries for 2 weeks and then come home. And then the next 2 weeks you'd go stand in a line again for 8 hours, and then it was nonsense.
Right.
Because
everybody had nonsense. I mean, we had nonsense here too.
Yeah.
So it's okay. So how long did you stay there and go through that, go through COVID there?
That was 4 months like that, where
Wow.
it was 2 weeks locked down, couldn't see anybody, couldn't talk to, and then go to the grocery store 2 weeks. We were like that. Not a whole lot of people were able to work remote jobs during that season. And so we were having blackouts with electricity. We also were having water situation like right before COVID hit. Cape Town had gone to they called it day 0. We made it to like day 11 before the dam filled up, but we had basically 11 days worth of water for the entire city of Cape Town. And then so we were all restricted to basically 2 gallons of water a day to bathe and wash dishes and drink tea or coffee or whatever, and that was so
That's miserable.
it was that's what my kids grew up in, and to think that they love South Africa and are like, why are we here in the US?
That's funny.
No, so yeah, Cape Town was locked down like that. Not a whole lot of people were working remotely, and so because of that, you've got a nation that is a very large majority are hand to mouth on a daily basis, meaning the money that they made today goes to buying the food that they eat tonight. Now all of a sudden they're not allowed to go out and work, and so crime already was really high, and then you've got a lockdown and crime just went through the roof. And we had multiple attempted break-ins at our house during that season. And then, all of a sudden, all these nations are turning to South Africa going, we're going to provide you money so that you guys can make it through. Well, guess whose contract doesn't get renewed for... Oh, like there's going to be a huge influx of money. Oh, we actually don't need your services right now for the moment.
We don't want to know about corruption when the money's coming in.
So there was nothing. There's nothing. I've got a PhD. I've got 25 plus year career, and I couldn't find a job for the life of me. And I'm living in a third world country, and I had to get my family out, and we ended up getting an email from the U.S. Embassy there in South Africa saying, we've got one last flight on August 16th. The next flight out of the country is probably going to be in February. So if you need out of the country before February, you have to get on this flight on August 16th. And so we ended up... That was July 31st that we got that email. So within 17 days, we had to call our church up. And again, nobody has any money to buy anything. So we just had to give everything away. But the Lord has given it to us. So we stood with open hands, and we're just so blessed to be able to bless our friends there in South Africa. So they came to our house. We had our 6 bags because that's all we were allowed on the flight in the corner, and they had to take like everything that we had built our life, our 10 years in South Africa, photos, dishwasher, laundry, couch, rug, whatever it is. If you can walk into your house tonight and just look around and think, all of this has to get out of the rental house
17 days
within a few hours. That was basically what happened. And so my kids had to sit there and watch all of their stuff go away too, and we got on the plane and flew back to the States and started over.
and you got a job in St. Louis.
Yep. By God's grace. So, yeah.
And so here you are today.
Yeah.
Awesome. And are you still doing your own thing?
I am, yeah. So I still run Ainsworth Studio with my brother. Because of my graphic design and web development background, and also software development background, and then my PhD is in organizational leadership, and then my brother is in like the social media, like marketing, all of that. So together, we're able to really help out companies with their digital innovation. I mean, that's where my passion lies, is being able to help companies kind of they might have 3, 4, 5 different software platforms, and then you've got people copying and pasting and a lot of errors. There's so much that can be done to simplify and automate. I love doing that kind of stuff. So
That's awesome. So if people want to get your services, where can they go?
AinsworthStudio.com. That's AINS Worth.
Okay.
Studio.
We'll put it up on the screen too and in the show notes. That way people can get to it. Last question. Do you think you'll ever go back to South Africa to be missionaries or going to missions at all? Are you like, hey, that was accidental and I don't see that happening again?
No, I think that right now, Rebecca, my wife, and I, we are trying to, because she's homeschooled the 4 kids for their whole time that they've been in school. We're really passionate about education and really passionate about Africa as well. So I am trying to get to a point where I have residual income so that we can go back to work with a foundation there that essentially has a Christian classical academic boarding school for free. And, we're looking at Malawi or Zambia, somewhere in that area.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of good work going on. I mean, there's a lot of need in Africa as a continent, big need. And we've been blessed on this podcast to have several folks. We've had Kenya, had a Kenyan pastor who's sharing his testimony and the big need in Kenya. We've had Nigeria. We've had several who have come through here. Just the deep need for the gospel to continue to grow on the continent of Africa. But but it is.
Yeah.
There is open hearts. There's people whose lives are being transformed, and as believers, we need to continue to pray for our brothers and sisters all over the world. So.
I would definitely, I would highlight that I didn't go there to change Africa. Africa actually changed me. There were so many people who were on fire for the Lord in Africa. They didn't need me to be there. Right. So, I was just being obedient.
I like that. That's really cool. Well, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate you sharing your story. It's a fantastic adventure you're on. I can't wait to hear more.
Yeah.
As you live it out. So hopefully you get to go back. If you do, I want to make sure we get you back on here. We'll do the remote thing and remote you in. You can show the kids and show us what's going on in that school.
Yeah, that'd be really fun.
Oh, it'd be awesome. You kidding me? Gotta love technology. We got Starlink,
right?
Elon.
Right.
So I was talking to a guy the other day who does orphanages with education through through Christian missions in a couple of African countries, and I looked at him and I go, but you guys got internet? He goes, we do, in the middle of the bush, like in the middle of nowhere, got internet because of Starlink. So that's really cool.
Wild.
Yep. $60 a month. They got their internet. So, hey guys, thanks for joining us. And don't forget to support those that support us. You can do that with Resource One and Andy McCollum and those guys. If you got any financial planning needs, 636-458-1798. We've had a bunch of them on here. They've had great testimonies as well. And, great team. Don't forget Chris at CS Design. They did our intro, outro that you'll be watching, and they do a whole lot more behind the scenes. And we're real thankful for their partnership. 573-436-3717 if you have any needs there. And Jeff Earhart with State Farm Insurance for any of your insurance needs. You can give those guys a call at 314-821-5333. If you're real lucky, you might just catch my normal co-host Scott answering the phone over there. So with that said, we'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks again, Josh, for being here.
Thanks.
Take care.
有